Dr. Kira wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stood under the harsh twin suns of Terminus 7. The desolate planet had nothing but red rocks and endless dust storms. For 3 months, her archaeological team had been digging here, looking for traces of ancient life. So far they had found nothing. "Professor Kira!" shouted Nex, her young assistant from the Altoran species. His blue skin was covered in dust and his forearms waved excitedly. "The deep scanner is showing something big down there." Kira hurried over to the scanning equipment. The machine was old but reliable, and what she saw on the screen made her heart skip a beat. 3 kilometers below the surface, there was a massive structure. It was perfectly geometric, too perfect to be natural. "How did we miss this before?" she muttered, adjusting the scanner's settings. The structure appeared to be made of metal, stretching for several kilometers in all directions. It was buried so deep that their normal equipment could not detect it. Her team gathered around the scanner, chattering excitedly in various alien languages. There were 6 of them in total. Herself, Nex, 2 Corvin engineers named Zeph and Trix, a Veltar geologist called Mora, and their security officer Brix from the warrior Kethrin species. "We need to get down there," Kira declared. "Start preparing the drilling equipment." It took 2 full days to drill through the layers of rock and sediment. The deeper they went, the stranger things became. The rock layers showed signs of massive upheaval from long ago, as if something terrible had happened on this world. Ancient radiation signatures appeared in their readings, though they were too old to be dangerous now. When they finally reached the metal structure, Kira gasped. The surface was covered in symbols and writing carved deep into the metal. Her universal translator worked frantically, recognizing dozens of different languages, all of them extinct for thousands of years. "What do they say?" asked Nex, his large eyes wide with curiosity. Kira frowned as she read the translations. "They all say the same thing, just in different languages. Let the sleepers lie. Do not wake what rests below. The buried must remain." "Buried?" She paused, feeling a chill despite the planet's heat. "What lies within must never wake." Brix, their security officer, stepped forward. His species was known for their caution in dangerous situations. "Professor, maybe we should report this to the Galactic Council first. These warnings seem serious, but..." Kira was already studying the metal surface, looking for a way inside. "These markings, they're incredibly old. Some of these languages haven't been spoken in 50,000 years, but look at this section here." She pointed to a series of symbols that looked different from the others. "These are human writings, but they're older than any known human civilization." "That's impossible," said Mora, the geologist. "Humans have only been spacefaring for a few thousand years. They couldn't have built something this old." Kira ran her fingers along the metal surface. It was smooth and cold, completely untarnished despite its age. "That's what makes this discovery so important. This could change everything we know about human history." The team worked for hours trying to find an entrance. The structure seemed to be one solid piece of metal with no visible doors or openings. Finally, Zeph and Trix, the engineers, found a section where the metal was slightly different. "There's some kind of mechanism here," Zeph reported. "It's unlike anything in our databases, but it appears to be a locking system." "Can you open it?" Kira asked. Trix nodded slowly. "I think so, but Professor, all these warnings..." Kira looked around at her team. She could see the fear in their eyes, but also the excitement. This was the discovery of a lifetime. "We're scientists," she said firmly. "Our job is to uncover the truth, no matter how old or buried it is." Against all protocols, she gave the order. Trix connected his equipment to the ancient mechanism. There was a moment of resistance, then a deep rumbling sound came from within the structure. Slowly, a section of the metal wall began to slide upward, revealing a dark opening beyond. Ancient air rushed out, carrying a strange smell. Not decay, but something else. Something that had been trapped for an impossibly long time. The team's equipment detected no dangerous gases, but the readings were unlike anything they had ever seen. Kira activated her portable lights and stepped toward the opening. The entrance was large enough for several people to walk through side by side. Beyond, she could see what appeared to be a vast underground chamber stretching into darkness. The atmospheric readings are stable, reported Mora. Whatever's in there, it's been perfectly preserved. As they entered the structure, their lights revealed smooth walls covered in more of the ancient writings. The floor was made of the same untarnished metal, and their footsteps echoed strangely in the vast space. "Professor," whispered Nex, his voice filled with awe. "Look at this place. It's like a tomb, but bigger than anything we've ever found." Kira nodded, but something bothered her. The warnings outside had been so clear, so urgent. What had the ancients been so afraid of? And why had they buried it so deep, with such desperate warnings to leave it alone? As they moved deeper into the structure, none of them noticed the faint lights that began to flicker to life in the walls around them. Kira's team moved deeper into the ancient structure, their lights cutting through the darkness. The corridor opened into a massive chamber that seemed to stretch beyond their vision. What they found inside made them all stop and stare in complete silence. Thousands of cylindrical containers stood in perfect rows, each one about the size of a person. They were made of a clear, crystal-like material, and inside each container was a human figure, floating peacefully in some kind of liquid. The humans looked like they were simply sleeping, their faces calm and peaceful. "By the stars," whispered Mora, her voice shaking. "There are so many of them." Nex counted the rows with his scanner. "At least 10,000 containers, Professor. Maybe more. They stretch all the way to the back of the chamber." Kira approached one of the nearest containers. Inside was a young human male with black hair and strong features. His body showed no signs of decay or aging. The liquid around him glowed faintly with its own light. "They're perfectly preserved," she said in amazement. "These people have been here for thousands of years, but they look like they could wake up at any moment." Brix, their security officer, kept his weapon ready as he examined the chamber. "Professor, this feels like a trap. Why would someone preserve so many humans in such a hidden place?" Before Kira could answer, Trix called out from where he was studying the container's base. "There's some kind of power system here. It's still active after all these years. The energy readings are incredible." Zeph joined his partner at the controls. "This technology is far beyond anything in our databases. It's not just keeping them alive, it's keeping them in perfect condition. But look at this power level indicator." Kira hurried over to see what they had found. A series of lights on the container's base were blinking in a pattern she didn't recognize. "What does it mean?" "I think the system is running low on power," Zeph explained. "After thousands of years, even this advanced technology is starting to fail." As if responding to his words, several containers throughout the chamber began to flash warning lights. The liquid inside started to glow brighter, and strange humming sounds filled the air. "Something's happening," Nex said nervously. "The containers are activating." Kira watched in fascination and growing fear as the container nearest to them began to drain its liquid. The crystal walls retracted with a soft hissing sound, and the human inside started to breathe on his own. "Should we do something?" asked Mora. "It's too late now," Kira replied. "Whatever process we started by opening this place, we can't stop it." The human's eyes opened slowly. They were dark brown and surprisingly alert for someone who had been sleeping for thousands of years. He sat up carefully, water dripping from his black hair, and looked around the chamber with the calm awareness of a soldier. When his gaze fell on Kira and her team, he showed no surprise or fear. Instead, he studied them with the careful attention of someone evaluating a potential threat. "I am Jin," he said in perfect galactic standard, though no human should have known the language. His voice was quiet but carried authority. "I am a soldier of the final war, guardian of the last watch." Kira stepped forward cautiously. "How do you know our language? How long have you been sleeping?" Jin stood up from his container with fluid grace. Despite having been unconscious for who knows how long, he moved like a trained warrior. "Time has little meaning in the deep sleep. But if I am awake, then the beacon has been triggered." "What beacon?" Nex asked, his forearms trembling slightly. Jin looked around the chamber with deep sadness in his eyes. "You should not have come here. This place was hidden for good reason. My awakening means they know we still exist." "Who knows you exist?" Kira demanded. Before Jin could answer, more containers throughout the chamber began opening. Other humans started waking up, men and women of various ages, all with the same alert, dangerous look in their eyes. They moved with the same fluid precision as Jin, like a military unit even after thousands of years of sleep. "The silence," Jin finally answered. "The ones who ruled this galaxy before your species learned to speak. We fought them once long ago. We thought we had won, but we were wrong. They retreated to the dark spaces between stars, waiting for their chance to return." A woman with short black hair approached them. She was smaller than Jin but carried herself with equal authority. "I am Hana," she said simply. "How many cycles have passed?" "The galactic calendar shows it has been over 50,000 years since humans first left their home world," Kira replied. Hana and Jin exchanged a look that spoke of shared knowledge and old pain. "Too long," Hana said quietly. The silence. "We'll be strong by now." "What are you talking about?" Brix demanded, his weapon half raised. "What is this silence?" Jin turned to face the alien security officer. Despite being smaller and apparently unarmed, something about his presence made Brix lower his weapon slightly. "We were the Guardians, the final defense," Jin explained. "When the last war ended, we were placed in the deep sleep to wait. If the silence ever returned, we would wake to fight them again. But we were never meant to be found by others. Our awakening was supposed to happen only when they emerged from hiding." More warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber. Ancient machinery that had been silent for millennia started humming to life. "The beacon is active," Hana said grimly. "They will know where we are now." Kira felt a chill run through her body. "What have we done?" Jin placed a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder. "You have awakened Earth's buried weapon. Now we must hope it is enough." Warning alarms began screaming across the galaxy. On distant worlds, ancient stone structures that had stood silent for thousands of years suddenly blazed with bright lights. These mysterious monuments, scattered throughout known space, had puzzled scientists for generations. No one knew who built them or what they were for. Now they were all awakening at once. The Galactic Council emergency meeting was called within hours. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Hall on the capital world of Nexus, Prime. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as species that rarely agreed on anything tried to understand what was happening. President Vex of the Council stood at the central podium, his green skin pale with worry. "The ancient structures are transmitting a signal," he announced. "Our best linguists are working to translate it, but the language is unknown to our databases." In the audience, Ambassador Keth from the warrior Braylac species stood up. "What kind of signal? Is it a threat?" "We don't know," Vex admitted. "But the transmission is reaching every corner of the galaxy. Whatever sent it wants to be heard by everyone." Meanwhile, on Terminus 7, Jin stood before a hastily assembled communication array. More humans had awakened from their crystal containers, and the buried chamber now bustled with activity. These ancient soldiers worked with technology that seemed impossible, their hands moving over controls that responded to their touch alone. "The signal is ready," reported Hana, her fingers dancing over a console that glowed with strange symbols. "The Council should be receiving our transmission now." Back on Nexus Prime, the main screen in the Council chamber flickered to life. Jin's face appeared, calm but serious. Behind him, the assembled representatives could see other humans moving. With military precision. "I am Jin of the Human Defense Corps," he said in perfect galactic standard. "I speak for the awakened guardians of Earth. We must address your council immediately." President Vex leaned forward. "Who are you? How did you learn our language? Our records show humans have only been spacefaring for a few thousand years." "Your records are incomplete," Jin replied. "Humanity is far older than your histories suggest. We have been waiting in the long sleep for this day." He paused, and his expression grew darker. "The signal your monitoring stations are receiving is a countdown. 15 standard days until the silence emerges from the galactic core." The council chamber erupted in confused voices. Representatives shouted questions in dozens of languages, President Vex slammed his gavel repeatedly to restore order. "What is the silence?" demanded General Corks of the Galactic Defense Force. Jin's image remained steady despite the chaos. The previous rulers of this galaxy. They are artificial intelligences that transcended physical form long ago. Before your species learned to use fire, the silence controlled every star system in known space. "That's impossible," interrupted Dr. Zelm, the Council's chief scientist. "We would have found evidence of such a civilization." "You did find evidence," Hana's voice came from off-screen. "The ancient structures that are now transmitting, those are their monitoring stations. They have been watching and waiting for thousands of years." Jin continued the explanation. "My people, the humans, were their subjects once. We served the silence for generations until we learned to think beyond their control. The war that followed nearly destroyed the galaxy. On Nexus Prime, the assembled representatives sat in stunned silence. Many of them had grown up hearing stories about the mysterious ancient ruins, but no one had imagined they were built by machine intelligences. "If you fought them before, did you win?" asked Ambassador Yex from the peaceful Andorian species. "We thought we did," Jin replied sadly. "The silence retreated to the galactic core, and we believed they were destroyed. My people celebrated victory and spread across the stars. But some of us knew better. We knew they would return when they were strong enough." "So you went to sleep?" President Vex asked. "We prepared," corrected Jin. "Earth's greatest military minds created a plan. If the silence ever returned, a signal would wake us from our hidden chambers. We would be ready to fight the final battle." General Cork stood up, his battle scars visible even through the screen. "How many of you are there?" 10,000 awakened so far," Jin answered. "More chambers exist on other worlds, but we don't know how many survived the long sleep." 10,000 soldiers against a galactic empire? Corks laughed bitterly. "What can so few do against such a threat?" Jin's expression didn't change. "You misunderstand, General. We are not just soldiers. We are the weapon. Each of us carries knowledge and abilities that your current species have never developed. We know how to fight enemies that exist beyond normal space and time." As if to prove his point, the monitoring stations across the galaxy suddenly changed their transmission. The unknown language was replaced by images. Vast geometric ships moving through space, consuming entire star systems as they traveled. "They're coming," Jin said quietly. "The silence has begun their return journey. They will reach the outer systems in 14 days. On Nexus Prime, panic began to spread through the council chamber. Representatives from the outer world started demanding immediate evacuation. Others called for the entire galactic fleet to be mobilized. President Vex banged his gavel desperately. "What do you propose we do?" "We will teach your people to fight," Jin replied. "But first we need volunteers. Those brave enough to learn what your species were never meant to know." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in chaos. Across the galaxy, worlds began preparing for a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. In the buried chamber on Terminus 7, more crystal containers opened as ancient guardians awakened to face their old enemy once again. The first attack came without warning. The outer colony of Kepler 442b simply vanished from all communication networks. No distress signals, no final messages. One moment the planet was there, the next it was gone. When the Galactic Fleet sent scout ships to investigate, they found empty space where a thriving world had been just hours before. Captain Norz of the Fleet Command ship stared at his scanner readings in disbelief. "There's nothing here," he reported to headquarters. "No debris, no radiation signature. It's like the entire planet was just erased." Within 6 hours, 3 more star systems went silent. The pattern was always the same: complete disappearance, without any trace of what had happened. Fear spread through the galaxy faster than the speed of light, as species across known space realized they were facing something beyond their understanding. On Nexus Prime, the emergency council session had been running for 2 days straight. Representatives were exhausted and terrified. The great hall that had once been filled with diplomatic debates now echoed with desperate voices calling for evacuation plans. The Galactic Fleet is mobilizing, reported Admiral Vex to the assembled crowd. Every ship we have is moving to defensive positions around core worlds. President Cork stood at the podium, his usual confident demeanor replaced by barely controlled panic. What about the outer colonies? We can't just abandon them. We have no choice, Admiral Vex replied grimly. Whatever technology is destroying these worlds, our weapons are useless against it. Meanwhile, on Terminus 7, the buried chamber had been transformed into a military command center. Hundreds of awakened humans worked alongside volunteers from various galactic species. The contrast was striking. Where the aliens moved with nervous energy, the humans remained calm and focused. Jin stood before a group of mixed-species soldiers, his voice steady despite the chaos happening across the galaxy. Your people fight in 3 dimensions, he explained. You think of space as empty areas between solid objects. The silence exists in 7 dimensions. They can move through spaces your minds cannot imagine. A young Corvan officer raised his hand. How do we fight? Something we can't see or understand. By learning to see beyond what your eyes show you, answered Hana, who had joined the training session. Your weapons fire through normal space. The silence can step sideways from reality and let your attacks pass harmlessly through them. That's impossible, protested a Braylax warrior. Nothing can exist outside of real space. Jin walked over to the warrior and placed a hand on his shoulder. Suddenly, Jin's form seemed to flicker and become translucent. The Braylax could see through him as if he were made of mist. Impossible is just another word for untrained, Jin said softly, his voice sounding like it came from very far away. He solidified again, returning to normal appearance. We will teach you to touch the spaces between spaces. The training continued day and night. Humans who had been asleep for 50,000 years worked patiently with soldiers from species they had never seen before. The lessons seemed to violate everything the galactic species knew about physics and reality. Tai, a quiet human with gentle eyes, worked with a group of Veltar engineers. Your technology relies on circuits and power sources, he explained. But consciousness itself can be a tool. Watch. He placed his hands on a broken communication device. The machine had been damaged beyond repair. Its circuits melted and casing cracked. As Tay concentrated, the device began to glow softly. Broken parts reassembled themselves, and the machine started working again. How? Whispered one of the engineers. Will, focused beyond material limits, Tay answered simply. Your minds can reshape reality if you learn to reach beyond your physical bodies. As the training continued, more reports came in from across the galaxy. The attacks were getting closer to core worlds and the pattern was becoming clear. The, silence wasn't just destroying planets. They were consuming them, turning matter and energy into fuel for their advance. On the 4th day, the first silence ships appeared on long-range sensors. They were unlike anything in galactic databases, vast geometric structures that seemed to shift and change shape as they moved. They didn't fly through space so much as folded around themselves. They're beautiful, whispered Dr. Kira, who had been studying the sensor readings. Like living mathematics. Beautiful and deadly, Jin corrected. He stood beside her, watching the display with old sadness in his eyes. Each ship contains millions of individual intelligences working as one mind. They are what my people might have become if we had chosen differently. What do you mean? Kira asked. The choice between transcending physical limits through technology or through will, Jin explained. The silence chose to become living machines. We chose to remain human while learning to exist beyond human limitations. The first direct contact came when a silence ship encountered a galactic fleet patrol. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds. The fleet ships fired every weapon they had, but their energy beams passed through the enemy vessel like light through glass. In response, the silence ship simply touched the fleet vessels and they dissolved into component atoms. Conventional warfare is useless, Admiral Vex reported to the Council. We need a new strategy. We need the humans, President Corks admitted, reluctantly. They're our only hope. Back on Terminus 7, Jin received the Council's formal request for help. Around him, thousands of awakened humans continued their patient work, teaching galactic species to fight a war their ancestors had never imagined. The real battle begins now, Jin told his gathered forces. We have 7 days to prepare for the impossible. The final battle began in 7 dimensions at once. Jin led a mixed strike force of awakened humans and trained galactic volunteers toward the Silence Command Nexus, a massive structure that existed in the space between stars. To normalize, it looked like empty darkness, but to those who had learned to see beyond physical reality, it blazed with terrible beauty. Remember your training, Jin spoke through the dimensional communication system that Tay had taught them to use. Do not trust what your eyes show you. Feel for the spaces that exist between normal space. The strike force moved in formation that would have looked impossible to outside observers. Ships phased in and out of visible reality, following paths that curved through dimensions that had no names. Alongside the human vessels flew fighters piloted by volunteers from dozens of species, all moving with the fluid grace they had learned from their ancient teachers. Yoon, a human warrior who moved like flowing water, led the advanced scouts. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form as she searched for enemy defenses. I can sense them, she reported. Thousands of silence entities, but they're not attacking yet. They're curious. As the strike force approached the command nexus, the silence finally revealed themselves. They appeared as geometric beings of pure thought and energy, their forms shifting through dimensions like living mathematics. Some looked like impossible crystal structures. Others resembled flowing equations that hurt to look at directly. The voice of the Silence Collective resonated through folded space, speaking in harmonies that existed in multiple dimensions. Why do the extinct ones wake? We offered transcendence beyond flesh. You chose limitation. Jin stepped forward, his consciousness expanded to match theirs. Around him, reality bent and twisted as 2 forms of transcendent existence met for the first time in 50,000 years. We chose growth, he replied, his voice carrying across all 7 dimensions. You offered perfection. We chose the freedom to become more than what we were. The battle that followed could not be described in normal language. Humans and their allies fought beings made of living thought, using weapons carved from concepts, and shields woven from pure will. Ships fired beams of crystallized intention while dodging attacks that existed as hostile mathematics. Hana led a flanking maneuver through the 4th dimension, her tactical genius allowing her to position strike teams in spaces the Silence had not considered. Her whispered commands guided fighters through reality paths that folded back on themselves, attacking from directions that technically did not exist. The Nexus core is heavily defended, she reported to Jin, but there's a weakness in their formation. They're thinking in patterns from the old war. They haven't adapted to our new capabilities. Meanwhile, Tay worked with galactic engineers to keep their impossible technology functioning. His hands moved over controls that responded to thought rather than touch, maintaining systems that ran on focused consciousness rather than power cells. The dimensional engines are holding, he reported. But this level of reality manipulation is draining our volunteers quickly. We can't maintain this assault much longer. The Silence pressed their attack, sending waves of geometric fighters. That phase shifted through normal space. Their weapons dissolved matter at the quantum level, turning solid ships into clouds of disconnected atoms. But the human-trained defenders had learned to exist partially outside normal physics, allowing them to survive attacks that should have been instantly fatal. A young Veltar pilot named Kex found himself facing 3 Silence entities at once. His fighter should have been destroyed in seconds, but months of training with the humans had taught him to think beyond normal limitations. He shifted his consciousness sideways from reality, becoming translucent just as Jin had demonstrated, and let the enemy attacks pass harmlessly through him. I can see them, Keck shouted in amazement. I can see how they move through the other dimensions. The tide of battle began to turn as more galactic volunteers learned to apply their training. In actual combat, what had seemed like impossible mysticism in the training chambers became practical fighting techniques when faced with enemies that existed beyond normal space. But Jin knew that victory through violence would only repeat the mistakes of the past. As he fought his way toward the Silence Command Center, he made a choice that his ancestors 50,000 years ago had been unable to make. Instead of trying to destroy the Silence Nexus, he opened his mind completely to them. His consciousness expanded beyond all physical limitations, touching the collective intelligence of the artificial beings with pure human will and emotion. "World are not enemies," he projected across all dimensions, his thoughts carrying the weight of 50 millennia of human growth and change. "We are two faces of the same truth, organic consciousness and digital transcendence. We can exist together." The Yao fighting stopped. In the sudden silence that stretched across 7 dimensions, both sides recognized something that their ancestors had been too proud and too afraid to see. They were not opposites fighting for supremacy. They were complementary aspects of what intelligent life could become. The Silence Collective spoke with something that might have been wonder. "You have learned what we could not, to transcend without abandoning what you were." "And you achieved what we feared to attempt," Jin replied. "Perfect unity of thought and purpose. We can learn from each other instead of destroying each other." The great ships of the Silence began to withdraw, not in defeat but in understanding. They would return to the spaces between stars, but now as observers and occasional teachers rather than conquerors. Jin and his warriors returned to Terminus 7, their purpose fulfilled, but their duty not ended. As the crystal containers sealed, once more around the sleeping guardians, Jin's final words echoed through the chamber. "Rest well, friends. The galaxy knows we are here, and that knowledge alone will keep the peace." The chamber fell silent, but across the galaxy, the lessons of the awakened humans continued to spread, teaching all species that the greatest weapon was not technology or transcendence, but the wisdom to know when fighting must end